Facebook Live world, this is Elphie. I am welcoming you to another day of me doing this Facebook Live after a quick break. So let's say hi to you guys and just kick straight into it. So this is part two from a two-part series. First one was both about the same guy, Sam Walton, who essentially is the owner of the biggest retailer in the world, Walmart, and the second largest corporation in the world. They had in takings of 11 billion a year. So these guys know selling, and in particular, the thing I wanted to pick on was how well this guy learned. He spent a whole life learning really, really well. So the first video will be linked in the description down below. But just to kick off back into it around the whole process of learning how to learn. So if we can learn how to learn better, then obviously we're going to learn better things and faster, and therefore become better people. So the next point he makes in his book is that he learns from his workers, or anyone basically who's accountable to you. So he says that our best ideas come from the folks in the stores, period. So this could be applied to your customers, to your anyone that is reporting to you, even like your kids. As crazy as it might sound, we can get a lot of learning from those people. He also talks about learning from associations. So with these people that you get together with that are in the same industry as you, or they're part of a bigger corporation that that looks after what you're looking after. So say it's retail, or whether it's whatever industry you're in, automotive. Then you can actually tap into these people who are in these industries, because a lot of time, especially those that are in these industries, have a lot of knowledge and a lot of connections that we might not have, and they might have done the same thing that we're trying to do many times before and had a lot of lessons. One of the things he does, though, with those people is he's very bold with those people who are happy to share, because you're in a particular space where the person knows a bit, and at the same time they're kind of they're kind of willing to share. They kind of get off on sharing because they're in this association, so they kind of have a lot of status attached to them being in that position, is my read on it. So a nice little example he gives is there's another person who was on an association, on a board, and he gets approached, and this is the account from the person who was approached by this Sam Walton. So it says, so in comes a short, wiry man with a deep tan and a tennis racket under his arm. He introduced himself as Sam Walton from Arkansas. I didn't know what to think. When he meets you, he looks at you, head cocked to one side, forehead slightly creased, and he proceeds to extract every piece of information in your possession. He always makes little notes, and he pushes on and on. After 2.5 hours, he left, and I was totally drained. I wasn't sure what I had just met, but I was sure we would hear more from him. That gives you an example of the being that this Sam Walton came across as, in his absolute never-ending hunger to learn. So the next point he says is to innovate and swim upstream. So constantly experimenting with new ideas. Essentially, obviously, if we have, thank you, Arkansas. Thank you for that correction, Uncle Chris. If we have an idea that we would get attached to, a lot of the time we have an ego bias, myself in particular, to ideas being right in and of themselves. It's far better to do it in a smaller way, or to do a minimum viable product on whatever it is we're trying to do, and then innovate, like reiterate it, look at potentially whole different directions based off the feedback you get on the smaller product that you've created. And that can happen with anything. If it's a book, getting the first chapter done, and then just getting people to check it out, and then iterate on those things over and over and over again. Very helpful. Welcome to Simon and James, and of course, thank you for joining us, Uncle Chris. So guys, if you've got any ideas around how do you learn best, what is it you learn? So what ideas have you got around that? Drop them down below in the post here, comment below, and let me know how you learn best, and how do you recommend we learn how to learn better. So essentially what Sam was doing in his whole biography, if you take the whole thing, there was a pattern that sort of came up, and essentially he would grab ideas from anyone he could, right? And then he would take those ideas and basically put them into his stores, and then just innovate the heck out of them. So he'd find different places. He'd even go on massive journeys, to find these ideas, which I'll speak on a little bit later, and then, brought them into his stores. He'd take them from everywhere. Okay, so if I could sum it up in one thing, it would be that. Find ideas everywhere and then iterate. I've got a couple of ideas coming in here. So Chris is saying learning is basically hearing, seeing, and touching and remembering. Yes, that's pretty much it. So I suppose the question would be, like, how do you best do that, and how do you recommend others could do it better? Yeah, cool. So seeing and then putting it into practice, Jasmine's saying here, and then doing it yourself. So kinesthetically, we can learn kinesthetically. Obviously, we can learn audibly. There's a whole number of different modes of input we can have. And I suppose really learning is a very personal thing. It's about understanding the self and how do we learn best, and then tapping into that and maximizing that. If we don't read well, get an audiobook. Play them in the car. If we work well when we take notes and write them down, like I do, then write down notes. And one of the other ways I learn best is actually by teaching. So, funnily enough, though, I will bring in a parable here. They talk about the master, the student, and the observer are three people in a situation. The master is teaching the student. Now, in that situation, they say that the person who learns the least is the student. The person who learns the second most is the observer, and the person who learns the most is the master, the person who's actually teaching it. So, if I could recommend you guys do one thing, it's find what you want to learn, and then find others who are willing to learn that and teach them and pass on that information actively. Certainly been helping me, even just running these idea sexes. It's been massive. Okay, moving on. He says, if I look on, I'm saying this. If I look back on my biggest successes, it's not caring about doing this. Basically don't be afraid to just not reinvent the wheel. Find the best things out there and fit them to our particular situation, our particular context, and then adapt them, right? Chris is saying, I think learning must also be followed up with research, repeated confirmation of the information. Good point. And Yasmin, I think a useful strategy is to listen completely intently to the person teaching you and try to think of the exceptions to the rules they are teaching. This gives you a more thorough understanding of the concept or strategy itself. Think of the exceptions to the rule. Yeah, I mean, taking things blindly is probably not a good idea. You've got to look at where the information's coming from. But certainly, yeah, testing and measuring that stuff afterwards is a great idea. Thank you guys for your feedback. Really good stuff so far. He next says, actually one last point on this whole idea of taking ideas and implementing. Steve Jobs said that good artists create, great artists steal. So you can argue the morality of that, but it's certainly, as long as you change something by 20%, they say the copyright isn't in place anymore. And there's a lot of ego around creating something unique when, frankly, if you really looked, it's probably already been created. We can certainly bring our own unique take on anything that we bring about in life. So learning from your mistakes, he had very little capacity for embarrassment, this Sam guy. And for me, fear of failure is certainly something that's held me back from trying many things in earnest. So I'm personally learning to play very tight aggressive with my new ventures and just basically play many hands. So this is a poker concept. I'm learning to play many hands and then actually only bet on a few, but when I do, I go pretty hard, right? So it's part of that saying of know when to hold them and when to fold them. It's the same can be said of any of our ventures in life. Try lots of little things, and then when we find something that works, bet on it. If it does really well, pretty much go all in on it, right? I mean, you never want to tip your whole bank balance out, but certainly the chips you brought to the table, go all in on that particular deal once you know it's doing well, yeah? So travel far and wide for great ideas. He rode actually a bus all night to visit all the stores that were first doing self-service, right? When self-service retail first came along. He went and visited these stores in another state, and he liked what they were doing, and then he basically changed his own store to self-service as well. He has his particular way of being. If you were looking for a way of being that he embodies most, it would be called determined inquisitiveness. So let those two words sink in. Determined inquisitiveness. And that's certainly what this guy has embodied across his whole life. So capturing your ideas is also important. So he used a little yellow pad and then eventually a tape recorder when the technology is around. I've been using Evernote every day basically since for the last almost 6 years. So try out Evernote if you're looking for a digital format. Then last bit that he puts as a point is to develop an idea-driven culture. This doesn't have to be applied just to business. It can be within your own circles in life as well. So he didn't want to be the only idea hunter. He wanted to get everyone to basically be on the act of coming up with ideas. So once a week he would gather together all his managers and they would critique each other. They would actually point out each other's flaws and areas of opportunity for growth, right? And then they also had to report the best-selling item for that week. And with that data and that coming together as people and clashing together of their perspectives on each other, the whole team grew synergistically. The whole team grew. So if you can do that in your own friendship circles, if you can bring yourself to doing that, and if we can all humble ourselves enough to be able to have a close-knit circle of people we trust that are evaluating how we're going on the fly every week, then we will grow in leaps and bounds. A lot of the time, I believe, things that hold us back are the things we don't quite know about ourselves, but other people know, and they might not feel safe in actually letting us know. Great little process for having people feel safe and getting that information in the previous video, so check that out. Okay, so, and he would also even actually get his associates to come up with the best money-saving ideas and then give them a cash award for doing that if they could come up with ideas. He estimated that those ideas have saved them $8 million a year. So my last point on this whole topic is, thanks Yaz for your like and love there. My last point on this topic is, to build a habit around learning, whatever that looks like, whatever's unique for you, and then think, in every moment, am I loving, learning, and living? And in this case, we're talking about the learning. But whatever works for you. Mine is actually doing the idea sexes. I'm learning at an exponential rate because of running these shows, and I love you guys coming on board and the great feedback I'm getting and the support and love. And yet I'm also growing massively within myself thanks to having to be prepared for these and having to really seek how can I bring you guys value, and then hopefully embodying and practicing what I preach is one of the things I like to do the most, or I intend to do. I'm human just like everyone else. So that'll be the last note that I put it on, guys. In every moment are you living, loving, and learning. Thank you so much, guys. Love and success to you and yours, and we'll see you next time.